Welcome to Isolation Cast, Voices from Quarantine. Welcome back to Isolation Cast, Voices from Quarantine. It's hard to find joy in the start time. We are 3-4 months in for some people, but because of recent events, I've just gotten to experience something for the first time that everybody's a little shocked by. And I have a friend on the podcast with me who also experienced this. Alan Mendez, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Maddie.
So, Alan, tell us about yourself. Who are you? How do we know each other?
Sure. Well, we met doing theater.
We did.
We did. At Muhlenberg Summer Music Theater. What was the first show that we did? Was it Hair?
Hair.
It was Hair.
We did Hair. Yep.
It was Hair. We did Hair. We did Beauty and the Beast. Great times. Fun times. Yes, I'm an actor. Mostly theater. But I'll do a little bit of everything, you know.
You're on a musical theater songwriting team as well, yes? Composing
That's
team?
true. Mendez and Aberman. Find us on Instagram.
I love it. Yeah. So you're a multifaceted talent. So, Alan, what have we both just experienced for the first time?
We have both experienced Avatar: The Last Airbender.
I know everyone at home was probably screaming like, how is this the first time? But for you and I both, this is the first time that we have watched it start to finish, top to bottom. What has taken you kind of so long to jump on this? Because it is like a pinnacle of several generations worth of like entertainers and just people. What took you so long?
I remember like some friends that I would talk to and say like I'm finally watching Avatar, and they're like, I'm so surprised that you didn't like watch it before, like when it had first come out. But I think for me, I was just a little bit too old past that era, past the time when it was coming out. Like, you know, I was growing up and I was like, I'm gonna watch grown-up things like TBS, Everybody Loves Raymond and Friends and stuff. You know, I don't have time for Nickelodeon humor anymore. But I'd actually seen a couple episodes from some friends and roommates of mine. Just kind of like in and out, and was like, oh, that's kind of cool. But recently, I just was like, you know what? I think I'm gonna do it. You know, we're in quarantine, pandemic. You know what? I got no excuse anymore. And so it was actually kind of funny because I was watching a couple kung fu movies from like the first Hong Kong kind of beginning of when kung fu started to reach the States. And it had just got me very interested in Chinese culture and just East Asian cultures in general with martial arts. And so when I started reading about those influences in the animation of the different characters, it was just like I was just able to nerd out about it in many, many ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So, and like for me, it's one of those things because like it's so funny that you say that because like there is on my main show I talk about there's like a 12-year era of Disney films I didn't see because I was like, I'm just too cool for this. I'm like 19. This is just whatever. I'm gonna go drink. Yeah. But yeah, and so like for me, this was actually hitting the exact same time. So I grew up without cable, so I also didn't have cable at this point. So again, accessing this was difficult for a while, but about 4 years ago, this was streaming on Netflix, and I don't know why I didn't watch it then either, but kind of like you said, we are in quarantine. I've been powering through some things that I know I should have been watching or fell very far behind on, but so I think I posted something about Avatar, or you did, and we both commented, and we were both like, oh my God, it's our first times. And I immediately texted you and was like, you're coming on the show and we are talking about this. So the other day I finally finished and I was like, are you done yet? And I have to share what your response was because you said, oh, not only am I done, I've watched the live action as everyone at home groans, and I watched Korra. So, like, you have the full gamut of everything now, which is super exciting. So, everyone follow along with us. We're just going to kind of talk, not beat by beat in the show. We're going to talk about what we liked, if there was anything we didn't like, things that we find effective as, like, storytellers, and we're just going to keep reliving Avatar as many times as we can. So,
absolutely.
So, join us today. And I love that you brought up this idea of how they submerge themselves in culture, because it's really easy. Like, this was like the first major Western anime because it is obviously inspired by like the decades of Japanese animation, which most people know as anime, which at this point also had been kind of like a nerd thing. You watch it in the afternoon on Cartoon Network, you watch it on Saturday nights on Toonami. But like, you know, it's a thing that it kind of captured. And the animation early is a little rough. They were figuring some things out.
Sure.
But it really was the first of this idea of Western animators being inspired by Eastern animators and not appropriating an art form, but like reveling in that art form and furthering that art form. Because I think this also made, there are a lot of people when you ask what's your first anime, and it's like Dragon Ball Z and Sailor Moon or Avatar: The Last Airbender for a lot of people. So Alan, what were just some things that just stood out for you as you were watching through the show that you just loved?
I think the characters first. Like the characters, it's so remarkable the more I was watching it, like how developed and how nuanced these characters on this children's show were. You know, like these characters have more substance to them than a lot of primetime TV live action characters.
Oh,
you
yeah.
know? And so, like, to see within the first episode, like, Sokka says something about how, like, Katara, you're a girl, you shouldn't be able to do these things. Or, like, I'm a guy, I have to do these things. And, like, immediately, like, subtly, not so subtly talking about gender roles, episode 1. And just, like, going through that, seeing the transformations and the arcs of each of the characters. Like, the more I watched the show, the more I came to appreciate and love it. Which I think is also kind of cool because we see the ways that, like, you were talking about how that the animation style kind of changed a little bit, or at least it started off and in its own way. And I know this is veering a little bit away from Avatar, but seeing The Legend of Korra and seeing some of the animation choices in there, they're so nuanced. And it's just really amazing to see the ways that stories can be told and the ways that, like, the way that this specific animation style can shift and change while still honoring some of the different aesthetics.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you so much. And I think for this show, you could tell the creators and the artists grew with the characters, and the characters continued to grow because for some reason we love to tell these coming of age stories of like 11, 12, 13, 14-year-olds. And so we've also got, we're launched into a world that has been at war for 100 years. And so even though like Sokka and Katara are, I don't want to say that they are sectioned away, but like they're in a remote village that is away from everything else, but they're not naive, and they know the effects of the Fire Nation and the stretch of the Fire Nation, because we know in that first episode that they lost their mother. Like, that is something we know quite right away. Yeah. And I agree with you that I think we could talk for a season of a podcast of the growth of each of the characters, but it's one of those things that the creators grew, but they also had the characters grow with the audience, and that idea that the audience is going to be getting older and maturing. And something for me with that, they make every character redeemable except Fire Lord Ozai, because he is the big bad.
Yeah.
Like, even Azula, who I revel in hating.
Can we talk about the beach episode for a hot second?
Okay, I think, yeah. Actually, let's live in the beach. Let's live in the beach moment, because I posted on Facebook, I said, I do not know how to think about Ty Lee. I don't know if I'm supposed to like her. I don't know if I want to like her. I don't know if she's actually likable. Because they also make her like, oh, she's the Daria girl. You could or could not. You could leave her. But Ty Lee seems so different than everyone else in the Fire Nation, to the point where she's almost an air nomad in her physicality. Like, you would believe that, like, you could believe that she came from the people of the air tribe. Like,
well, even some of the animation elements in her are a little Aang-like, you know?
Well, and then just skipping to Korra, Tenzin's kids, 2 of his daughters look just like her. Now, again, it's in the same world. You're going to use character models and things, but But it's one of those things at the point where I was like, oh, she's supposed to be the likable Fire Nation girl, but I don't think I like her. Also, just because like the whole idea that she can block chi,
and was so like watching that, I was like, what was so cool to me about Ty Lee and May was that these are two, like, we know that Azula is a badass, right? Like we see her, we're like, she can do things that like Zuko can't do. That like she's like very formidable, and she chooses on her team not other firebenders, not other like elemental benders, but to non-benders, and so to see their different skills was really cool. And and the whole chi blocking idea is like it introduces new rules to this world. So I think the way that we learn about the rules of the world and the pace at which we learn them is very, very successful storytelling.
It is, and they keep giving us little things. So I don't want to say advantage, but it's a disadvantage. I watched Korra first when Korra was first running, because my ex loved Avatar. I'd seen episodes here and there, so I knew it was happening. Honestly, my first experience with Avatar was the live action movie. It was the first thing
I'm so sorry.
I went and saw it, and I liked the story. I just thought the movie wasn't effective. You can say what you will. It was very whitewashed as well. But like it. And at the time I went, well, it's not awful. It's not the best movie I've seen, but it's not the worst. But now that I've watched the show, I went, oh, God. So I knew that, like, bloodbending was a thing. So I was waiting for that bloodbending episode also because I knew it was coming. And there were just little things that, like, they foreshadowed so much. They gave themselves so much to work with, knowing they eventually wanted to do a sequel series. They were setting in motion things because, like, the chi blocking is all of season 1 of Korra.
Right.
Like that is, I forget his name, but like, it's the whole idea. Aman, yes. And so, but going back to the beach episode, I'm jumping around. I love slice of life episodes of shows.
Yeah.
And on certain POV, the network I'm on, the other day, Screen Snark did talk about the show. And they talked about filler and like anime with filler episodes, and even episodes that you could quantify as filler episodes for this aren't filler. Every episode that is not obviously progressing the plot, the A plot of everything, it's still laying so much groundwork. Like, we couldn't have had all of season 3 without the beach episode.
Yeah.
Zuko cannot come around. I mean, not to spoil. God, if you guys are listening to this and you haven't watched it, then we're just going to spoil everything. It's fine. Watch it anyway. You can't even have May and Ty Lee coming around. Yeah. But there is something really... It shows how effective Azula actually is as a leader, as a strategist, as a warrior, and it's because every other firebender that we meet except Iroh is hot-headed. They're unpredictable. They're uncontrollable, and because Azula is so practiced and so thought until season 3 when we watch her unravel, which is a very smart thing they do, it makes sense to have two bold personalities that aren't terrible to be around, but also two people that are stronger than benders without bending. And so you don't have the unpredictability of a Fire Nation sensibility, of a Firebender sensibility. And so having them there is so intelligent. And if they chose to save Azula from herself, those two would be her grounding they would be her grounding rod. They would be able to, and I do like that Azula is not, even when we understand and sympathize with her, she's not good. She never comes around. Yeah. And I think that's very important. And I think it's in this episode that really summed up, and I love the voice actress who played Azula, because she gets the biting wit, she gets that calm sass. It's like, just she's a queer icon without meaning to be a queer icon. But when she's like, my own mother called me a monster. I mean, she was right, but to say that to your 8-year-old,
not missing a beat.
Oh, and it was, I had to pause it and cackle, because it's one of those things that, like, part of the way you still want her to always succeed, because at points Team Avatar is not fun to root for. And so to have her be so much fun to watch, and it's so much, because you can call her rawly evil because she's just truly evil. But it's so interesting. It's so much fun to watch her be this like mathematician, a strategist, like all these things, and always having that upper hand on Team Avatar. Because there's nothing I hate worse than like the Harry Potter thing where there's always a lot of dumb luck, and that's how your protagonist wins the series.
Yeah, these characters like actually learn how to grow, and I mean, and you also see the villains or a lot of the characters painted as villains initially grow. There's just. It just goes back to like the nuance of the different characters. I think with Azula, what I love so much about that beach episode in terms of the color and just dimension of her, even as someone who's like, yeah, I'm evil and I know that I'm evil, is seeing her like, yeah, I'm evil and I know that I'm evil, but I still want a boyfriend, you know?
Yeah.
And like, I'm still a teen in these different ways. And to see like how does someone who wants to take over the world respond to a party?
Yeah.
At a house.
God. And I was at the beginning of the beach episode, I rolled my eyes and I was like, I'm not going to enjoy this. This is not fun. Though as a designer, I was like, those are really bold and interesting bathing suit choices. Yeah. I'm here for this. Yeah. Also, I love a hot Fire Nation boy. Strike me down. It's fine. Well, until we get to Korra, and then the Earth Boys. I like the Earth Boys. Bolin specifically. I just
Bolin.
like Bolin.
Oh, yeah. We knew it was Bolin.
Oh, we knew, because everyone was like, no.
Was it Nuktuk?
No. Nuktuk, yes. Nuktuk. And, you get to that point and you're just like, ooh, okay. Maybe Bolin's, because everybody's like, oh, he's the thick boy. And I was like, oh, he's muscle. He's, we did not see really a fat earthbender the whole time. So I just don't think it's possible. But yeah, I think seeing Azula like try to keep that shit together, and then finally when she was like, you know what, we're gonna do this the way we do it, and when they went back and trashed the party, and it's just way more fun for everybody.
Yeah.
And Dante Bosco did such an amazing job of making Zuko relatable, even when he's making the stupidest decisions, and he could be just an angsty meme lord. Like Avatar's in the time of the Scene Kids. Like, it could be really easy for him to just fall to that like wilting emo boy, and he never really does, which I really like. And it's the same way they don't always make Sokka the goofball. Like he could easily just be, but like you also like he's the lover boy. You root for him with all these girls who like Sokka, and you're like, all right, Sokka, I'm here for this.
Well, I love that the self-awareness of the show, where like he's goofy and like he's got these lame one-liners and some great one-liners, but I like that humor. And then you see scenes and episodes where like when he goes to train with his master in the Fire Nation, his comrades are like, his friends, they're like, where's Sokka? Like, he's got all these lame jokes. I miss him. And so there's this self-awareness that they're like, this is kind of an archetype, but also we know that that's the case, and also we know that there's more to him than that.
Right. Well, and the scrappy hero is where you think Aang is, but the scrappy hero archetype is actually where Sokka lives. And that idea that like Sokka from a toddler was trained to be a warrior. Like, that is what the Water Nation does. They know how to hunt, fish, and they know how to go to war and defend the nation with boomerangs. Yeah. And also like Sokka getting the Star Sword, Space Metal Sword. They're just so... There's so many things that, again, they keep growing. And like Katara, she could be the know-it-all. It really easily, and we see that actually cause them to fall apart in book 2 when we get Toph, who is the polar opposite of Katara, and with having an earthbender on the team, and just the difference of what that means between Aang's flightiness and Katara is so grounded, but it's just so craving for knowledge and things. And it's one of those, they took from a Harry Potter fans out there, they kind of took that idea of what J.K. Rowling and what everybody has done with your hero trio, and they flipped it and they really made it work. Something kind of going with this that I also appreciate they did, they made sure that you saw that there were good people in every nation and there were bad people in every nation. And like sometimes in the Fire Nation, it was only Uncle Iroh, which God, we could all strive to be more like Uncle Iroh, especially right now. But I even liked with the Fire Nation that they always would show a lot of the warriors were like, just doing their jobs. Like they could firebend so they like, oh, I think it's book 3 when they're going, oh yeah, it's right before the comet. And it's all of the blimps, the Fire Nation blimp, and before Ozai becomes like Fire Blaster Ozai. And they were like, I can't believe he remembered my birthday. And we probably haven't met because I work down in and I was like,
like I'm over in HR. You know?
Yeah, in any other show, they would have thrown those 4 lines out, and they wouldn't, because like in a 21-minute show, 90 seconds makes or breaks a whole episode. And for me, they were willing to live uncomfortably in a lot of these moments of people being people. And I think it was ultimately so that we would still be rooting for there to be a Fire Nation left for Zuko to become Fire Lord of. Yeah. Or secretly, I also was kind of wanting Iroh to take over and be Fire Lord for the rest of his life, but it's also not what Iroh wanted at all. Sure. So, not after he lost a son, it wasn't worth it. And I think they also did because this is also back Bush. We just got Obama in the last 2 years. And so it was also, or the last year, and so a lot of it was also that idea of like, they're not pro-war and they're not pro-military, but they're pro-learning why people decide they have to serve, or pro-that there are people serving whether they want to or not. And I think that is it was such a beautiful moment.
Well, it's very interesting with the Fire Nation, how there's like, talking about how the first episode we get themes of feminism and battling misogyny. We cover imperialism. We cover genocide, wiping out the air nomads, and this manifest destiny. At least for U.S. listeners out there, right? Yeah. That like we have a responsibility to share and spread what we believe is best, and that's what the Fire Nation does. Really, like. So I think that the leaders there. They are more nuanced than we might first expect them to be,
Oh, yeah. Well, and there are those moments, too, where, and then we see pure colonialism with that they decide they have to help the savage people of the Earth Nation. They must help them and develop these colonies. And I think the smartest decision they made was that having the Avatar before Aang was Roku and having him be a Fire Lord, Fire Nation. Mm-hmm. And then as we went along and found out that he was like best friends of the Fire Lord, and he's Zuko's grandfather. You're just like the more they layer on to that family is just, it's so impressive to me. And and something else with that, the callback to characters that they easily could have never mentioned again. And because in book 1 and early book 2, we get a lot of one-off characters that we meet in one episode, and we could never meet them again. Also, even smallest things as like the cabbage seller. Yeah. Like he is.
Fast forward to Korra, right?
Oh, yes. Yeah, and it goes all the way into Korra, also just because it's a nice moment. Like, it's one of those, like, we're just now getting Funko Pops of the Avatar characters, and the cabbage guy was one of the first set we got. Like, it's just so funny. But it's those moments of, I felt from a storytelling standpoint, whether it was ultimately all thought out, you could tell that the show controlled its beginning, middle, and end. It knew where it had to end. They gave us a single thread that wasn't wrapped up, that if they wanted to continue, they could. But they knew where they were going, so they knew how to traverse the universe in order to keep bringing people back. Yeah. Like that we had, I love the White Lotus men and bringing all the old dudes back to help them like fight and like referencing that like 100 years seems like no one from Aang's time would be there, but like Boomy's still around. Yeah. Like God bless King Boomy. Like, it's just one of those things that I love nothing more than we all get sad when a show ends, but I love a show ending on its own terms.
Yes.
And Avatar does that in such an amazing way.
Yeah. It's so concise and so well thought out, or at least it appears to be, to me when watching the show. I like talking about Legend of Korra for a little bit. I really enjoyed when I first saw the first couple episodes. I was like, oh my gosh, this animation style, like, this is so much more nuanced than what Avatar was. Like, I've got like such a crush on Korra. There's this strong, powerful, like, and this person who is in a way not the full antithesis to Aang, but very much so, not the spiritual character. And so there's a lot that made me go into it thinking, man, this is going to be really, really cool. But what it doesn't have that Avatar: The Last Airbender has is character development and story arc over the course of 3 books, whereas Legend of Korra feels like there is still some growth, but it's you feel like I feel like I'm on 3 journeys that are connected,
Yes.
whereas Avatar: The Last Airbender is one epic journey over 3 books.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it was obvious. So you can tell the difference between where Nickelodeon was as a network in 2008 versus where it was when they started Korra. And with Korra, most people are like, Korra was so rough I couldn't get past book 1. And I was like, well,
really?
A lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people. I didn't have that problem. I thought it was a little rocky in places, but like, they checked all the boxes for me that Avatar did early on, so I was on board with it. We didn't have Appa, but we had the giant polar bear dog. I love him.
Gosh.
And, and we've got the fire ferrets, and we've got this idea of like, because I love the idea of like, I don't like steampunk necessarily, but I love that they were like, what did industry looked like in the Asian continent when it was happening in the West as well? And so answering all these questions of, you've got technology that is making people as strong as benders, but like what happened when the Earth Nation had the access to the Fire Nation's technology? What happens when the water tribes stopped being so separate from everyone else? What happens when we connected these things? And I like that they didn't separate it from Aang. It was important that Aang wasn't there, obviously, because we couldn't have another Avatar without Aang. And Katara is there. And Zuko comes in later, and we get Toph at one point. But like, we have Lin Beifong from the beginning. And this idea of like, the police force uses Toph's technique of metal bending, which is just really fucking cool.
And firebenders or lightning benders and metal benders can come together, and then we have Industrial Revolution grade technology. And
what does that mean for war? We see Asami the first time in a motor car. Like, the idea of what has changed in less than 100 years to get Korra where, and what cities look like versus what cities look like before. And importantly, they changed art styles because they were paying attention to how art changed in the East and West. And so it looks way more like a lot of Asian pulp novels and magazines and things looked in the early 20th century, like up pre-World War I and World War II. And so it's really interesting to see all of the change in this world with Avatar. But you are right. I think one of their big things was they had an idea of what they wanted to do, but then you had a network going, oh, you can't do that. And then so they were going, okay, cool. And I don't think they started book 1 of Korra knowing where book 4 was going to end.
Yeah.
And so I think that was a problem. And because for me, like, book 2 is fine, but it's lost until we get the Avatar Wan episode, which is beautiful. Again, changing art style, and it went back to the idea of the old, like, kabuki screens and original, like, old Asian art. And, anybody that's had a humanities or art history course can see that difference in just brushstroke and all of these things, which is just beautiful. But I wish you are correct that there's not as much character focus in Korra. Also because we launch in with a lot of characters from the very beginning of Korra.
Yeah, it's a lot. What I liked about it is the way it expands on the world. Because like if the plot isn't that great in a given show, I'm still there for it if the world is cool. And,
Oh, yeah.
and you know, and the propositions that the artwork and the storytelling is making about that world. And I think that's what I liked about a lot of Korra. But the plot was also good. You know, not that it wasn't bad, but I think that Avatar: The Last Airbender like introduces us to the world in its own way, and it still allows us to grow with it, and it introduces a lot of it introduces a lot. Like when we first get exposed to the spirit world and what that looks like. You know, I really enjoyed, and then seeing that expanded on in Korra, it like was something that I thought was really cool. And again, like another thing that a children's show can do, you have a character that's like, you know, I don't believe in spirits. You know, like you have Sokka being very secular, very, you know, kind of very Enlightenment age. Like if I can see it, if I can touch it, you know, I believe in it. And then you have a society and a world that is built on and predicated on the existence of these spirits that have their own agendas and personalities and aren't deities in the. I mean, you know, I guess this is just kind of standard for Eastern certain Eastern cultures' perceptions of or Asian cultures' perceptions of spirits and the roles that they have, but it's cool to see it on a show on Nickelodeon, you know?
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those things that I think it showed, this show set a tone for the next 15 years of animation that would not just be for kids. Like, I don't think we could have had Adventure Time and Steven Universe and Regular Show and Midnight Gospel and all of these shows that are really, they're psychedelic and weird and pushing envelopes, even though they're sold as a kid's show. You know, Steven Universe episode 1, he's sad because his favorite ice cream bar is being discontinued. And, you know, in episode 100, he meets Bismuth and, you know, has to do things that Steven doesn't like to do. This show is the same way. We get this wacky 9-year-old boy who it just wants to, like, ride around on his little air ball and like play sports that he and the rest of the air nomads made up and those cute things. But again, we see that evolve in Korra because we see a sport where you need an airbender, a waterbender, and or you need a waterbender, a firebender, and an earthbender to play the sport together. And you know, they're just those things that are really interesting. But again, and in that they go, that's a world where humans that are not benders can live without bending and live beyond bending because they don't need it, which is also something that I think is that equalizer of everything. I just think the production designs top to bottom is so smart because again, it could have been really cringy Asian stereotypes and cherry picking things, but you can tell the art department and the designers did their research into, and even the idea you brought up, the spirit world, that every animal is connected to the spirit world, but they have a different form in the spirit world. And I love that. I think it's the one with the forest spirit that's just the big panda and he's just grumpy. It's so, I love it so much. But with that, I love that they use the spirit world to give Aang limitations because he's a Superman type character. And it could be, and because we see that avatar state really early on. Like we see him achieve that avatar state with little control, because that avatar state he hits in book 3 at the end is very different than his book 1 avatar state. And you know, that is also limited by that he didn't know how to earthbend or firebend. He barely knew how to waterbend. But you know, it's just so interesting. Again, I think it's because they knew where they needed to go with it. And they were, I think what is helpful is they are so self-aware, and they knew, I think with that, they knew they had to be careful because it was pre the idea of the over gatekeeping of PC culture and this idea of gatekeeping cultures and things. But, you know, they were so respectful and so reverent, and they were like I want to talk about the theater episode from book 3 a little bit. But that is such a study of Beijing opera and kabuki theater, and knowing how they achieved these grand fantasy scenes in pre-electricity and pre-technology, like what that looked like, because we've been flying people in theater for 2,000 years. So like, or not really 2,000 years, but for like 1,500 years we've been flying people in theater. So like, again, anybody that's taken a theater history course should know this. But you know, it's just, they're just so informed about every choice they made. And in Korra, you could tell they were able to make up the world more. They were creating a world that didn't ever quite exist. And, you know, they really flexed hard on that in Korra in many ways. But, you know, in Avatar, I think Avatar is grounded in a way that they could let... Korra could fuck up a little along the way if they need to, because it's a different show. It's a different kind of show.
Yeah.
But, again, they couldn't have made that show without making Avatar first.
100%. In terms of... You were talking about the kind of appreciation and attention to detail that the animators had. I want to talk a little bit about the different martial styles that inspire the choreography for the different nations, right? So Water Nation is Tai Chi, right? And earthbending is Hungar, airbending is Bagua, and fire is Northern Shaolin. And like, just for my own sake, one of the things, like, when I watch something that, like, I'm very inspired by, I start to, like, geek out about it, like, really dig into the culture and, like, find something that I can incorporate in my life to a degree to grow from it. And so for me, reading about the different combat styles, I had already been watching a lot of kung fu movies that focused on Shaolin Temple. And Shaolin in terms of as an umbrella term is different from Northern Shaolin Kung Fu, which was actually developed, I want to say the 18th century, like after the Shaolin Temple, right, had been founded. And so watching the different techniques and the movements that are in, like, seeing them assume, like, horse stance, and, like, I know what horse stance is now because I've been, like, you're just reading about like fundamental kind of martial arts stances and stuff, and reading about the languages that they're using with, like, oh, let's practice the forms, or these sorts of things that are that show that they have explored the ways in which these sorts of skills would be developed. And it's not just like, you know, it's not like Harry Potter where you know the words and a swish and flick, and it's this kind of where we're still kind of learning the rules of it. You know, this is fundamentally a martial technique that is endowed with like elemental ability, which also makes me. I was talking to my girlfriend about this, about how fire bending is the one element that is bent that is not from something that, like, is pre-existing around them, that is something that comes from within. And I thought that was, at the time, I was like, sure, I'm totally on board for it. Seeing it in Avatar, and seeing it in the movie of The Last Airbender, where they have these, fire, like, torches and sconces around, and they move it from there. I was like, that's an interesting choice. But I actually think that the notion of this energy coming from the breath, coming from one's inner chi, is cooler, you know?
Yeah. Now, I will say something controversial. I actually do like the limitation of the Fire Nation having to have fire, and then that there is that one day of the year where they have unbridled power to create it. That was the one thing that I went, it limits them a little more, but the fact that they've still taken, because they have to take it with them and they've developed that technology, they're still fairly unstoppable. So that is an aspect I did like. But I agree with you now that I've seen the show. The thing about fire is because, you know, they always say, don't light a match by gasoline, do all these things, that they were like, static electricity could start a fire. It's this idea that really fire could start from our very, you know, the air around us, but also we always say you got to find that fire inside yourself. You got to kick up that fire. I mean, it's the only good song from Little Women, the musical. But like, it's this idea that like they can create that fire also. 'Cause like an airbender is always going to have air around them. And that idea of like Katara had to always have that little vial of water, which was very a smart character thing. But there is something really interesting about the technique of firebending and them being able to create that is really interesting. And again, it obviously makes them the power player because then they can separate earthbenders from the earth and waterbenders from water.
Right.
And they just get rid of the airbenders. So like, they can kick that back. And so I agree. It's a very interesting thing that they did in telling that story. That is really, really great.
Yeah. It stuns me to see just the attention to detail, the poses, even with the hands, like those we see when Boomy and Aang are fighting. Again, it just speaks to the animators' attention to detail, the concepts, the inspiration points and the influences. And I remember reading that Toph's style of earthbending is actually a little bit different. I don't know if it's because I don't remember if it's because she's blind, or not, but that Chugar Southern Praying Mantis style. The Wikipedia article. It develops a unique fighting style as a result of her blindness.
Well, and so Toph is an interesting character because, especially now, we're all looking for places that we can put non-white, non-able bodies because non-white and non-able bodies are all over life. They exist. They are people that are not straight, not white, not all these things are what makes up most of the world, the communities that we're in. And so without saying anything, but when they go, okay, cool. So Aang's earthbending teacher is actually going to be like a 10-year-old blind girl who's a princess.
Yeah.
And everybody goes, no, you can't do that. And they just went, listen, fucking watch us. And it's interesting because, again, Toph at times is such an unlikable character, and we know we're supposed to like her, but we watch her fumble because also her leaving her kingdom was really important for her character because she also had to grow. One, okay, also because the episode we meet her is a WWE wrestling episode with a parody of The Rock named The Boulder, and he's got the fucking eyebrow. Like, it is, one, for all my wrestling fans out there, it is, one, it is prime. Two, it made me want to go watch like the last 10 years of WrestleMania. But like, it's one of those. It was so smart. Again, it was so smart in how they did it, and they didn't alienate their audience by doing such a niche episode. But it taught us so much about Toph. But then to like 3 or 4 episodes later, when they're at the library in the desert, and she's like, I hate flying. I can't see in sand.
Yeah.
And this idea, but like that there's constantly this idea that she's not powerless because of her limitations. She's powerful because she learns how to work with her limitations, which is what all of us do. I mean, I'm a hard of hearing person, and it always, but like passable because I lost my hearing later. And so it's one of those things. It's like, it's so impressive anytime that you can just see people that are like, yeah, it's a part of me and all of these things, but nobody has told them at any point that they're limited. And so, having Toph go, oh, I need to play this role, but I'm really this other person, again, which also speaks to so many other aspects of I think it's a show for the others out there, in the way that like the X-Men were always for the others in comic books, and Toph represents so many of us having to like play a role, but really being this like strong badass. And like, once we're able to impress that, but at no point did they ever make her a victim. They didn't use her as the brunt of the joke. They didn't make her weak because she's a woman or because she is othered. She's not they didn't take an ableist approach to her, and I think it's beautiful. And I forget his name, but the Earth Kingdom boy that's in the wheelchair.
Yes, the son of the inventor.
Yes, the son of the inventor, who is such a fun, like, he's such a badass character too.
Yeah.
Like, he flies into literal war with Aang. Like, they just, at no point did they say, oh, we're going to have this character and it's going to be the after school special episode with that character. But even you talked about Sokka's, like, cause Sokka is such a bro. Like, he's such a, he's the neck. He represents
he's
the
like,
neck
girls
beards.
can't fight. Like, Kyoshi warriors, what?
Oh, yeah, exactly. I was going to bring up the Kyoshi warriors, who continue to come back time after time after time, and I love them. They are so good. I just found out that a book was published last year about Avatar Kyoshi.
Really?
It's 2 books about her life, and she's canonically gay, which I love. So we'll get to that in a bit. But, they do all these things where at no point do they make these people feel sorry for themselves, or, what a lot of able-bodied people do when they put others in their pieces. They embrace that, like, their bodies are different, but they are still warriors. They're still genius people. They're wonderful people. And so, it's just one of these things that, like, they did so many things right without holding a light up to themselves and going, we did these things. Look at us. We're so good.
Yeah, they're just like, this is part of the world, and as it is a part of ours, and let's get on with the show, Yeah. Let's not make it be a big deal.
Yeah. I want to talk about something real quick. I think it's just called Tales from Ba Sing Se.
I'm so glad you brought it up.
Also, I was shocked that they were only nominated for 1 Emmy for Best Animated Series. 1. During the whole run.
Rob.
And to me, watching Tales from Ba Sing Se and then the Appa episode that comes immediately after it, I was like, this is their Emmy episode. Like, to me, they tell 4 beautiful stories in 21 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's just, I might cry just thinking about the Uncle Iroh part of it specifically.
That's one that will always stay. Like, this is a kid's show,
It's a kid's show
that makes me cry.
But also, how many times in kids' shows, they show us several different ways to deal with grief in this series, and none of them are by letting ourselves be powerless. And, they also show, like, what happens when Zuko is so obsessed with, like, revenge versus Iroh, who's there every day trying to be better, and that's how he's avenging his son. Because Iroh could have snapped and immediately gone toe-to-toe with his brother, but he didn't. Also, I didn't know that Fire Lord Ozai was voiced by Mark Hamill.
Yes! Doesn't it just make it so much better?
Yes, we'll have to get to the voice cast eventually, because it's so good. But yeah, so this Tales of Ba Sing Se is, and, like, the fact that one of them is a Momo, like, mini thing. Also, like, my heart weeps for Zuko for so much of the show.
Oh my gosh.
And for us to get, like, he goes on a fucking date. Like, it's so sweet.
And when he leaves, and then he's like, how was your night? Slams the door, opens it again, and goes, it was nice. And then it goes back in. It's like, the layers of Zuko.
Well, and it shows, like, Zuko is the most teenager that ever teenaged.
Oh my God.
Like, because he's
a teenage boy who's angry at everything for no reason.
Yeah, well, and he'll slam a door, and then he always is so abusive to Iroh, and Iroh's just like, would you like a cup of tea? Again, because Iroh is so opposite of the Fire Nation in every reason, and it's because of the loss of his son. And we knew kind of what happened, but I think we needed that. It's not even 5 full minutes of how when he goes to the fucking tree and pours a cup of tea and just talks to, like, it's, oh God, you guys aren't gonna hear. Okay, I'm good. I'm so good. Okay. But it's one of those things that also I imagine that those episodes were more stage direction than dialogue. Like, there's not that many like Zuko has the most dialogue because he's on a date. But even then it's awkward and fun.
Yeah.
But they let us live in silence for so much of it. And as viewers, a lot of times, like in theater, we talk about this all the time. Living in silence makes an audience uncomfortable. Making them live in darkness makes them even more uncomfortable. And so those beats feel longer. But like, so we just live with the score, which also the music, Jesus, it's
beautiful.
This series scored by anyone else, and also the sound design of mixing the bending noises, and just this is one of the most environmental shows that I think I've ever seen. Because especially in an animated series, you've got like some underscoring and you've got key audio, but like you don't have a ton of sound effects. And this show is all sound effects.
The water, the air, and yeah.
It's so good. But that, for me, like that Tales of Ba Sing Se, one, it also helps us learn where all of our characters are in such an important way. Mm-hmm. And we didn't need to give each of them an episode, because I think if everybody had an episode, it would have been too much.
Yeah.
And each of those things actually helped us further the story in such a way that we then could give Appa a whole episode.
Yeah.
Well, it's just like when Zuko leaves and he goes and helps the family on the farm. That did need to be a full episode. And there are those moments where they stop us and we have to live in a moment because we have to learn something. And it's really rewarding as an audience member to like be invested in a character and see them change and grow, and then think, because we then change and grow without really thinking about it, and we start altering our perception of how we look at other people, which I think is very important.
A concept that my uncle, who was the first person to expose me to like D&D and role play, talks about in just storytelling, the value of like I'll call it like the cool moment principle, and that like if you're in a D&D game or in a show that the characters, I think, let's talk about D&D for a second. They giving each player a moment that specific character gets to grow in a way that makes them feel like they are the protagonist in a very kind of particular way outside the context of being a party, like co-opting to achieve some sort of goal, is something that like a player really, really can value. And I think that the storytellers in Avatar: The Last Airbender do that with all of the characters. Every character gets their cool moment. You know, Sokka gets to meet a master, and Katara gets to meet a master and do the waterbending. And it's in ways that aren't just, these are the protagonists that meet these points in the arc. It's this kind of full, multifaceted way in which Zuko gets to have his cool moment. Iroh is a cool moment, you know?
Iroh is a cool moment, yeah. But in even, going back to the beach episode, we get a vulnerable and, like, weird moment for Azula. Yeah. Like, and I also always forget, I was like, Azula's, like, 16. Like, we got to give her this. Like, she is a literal teenage girl. She's got, she got cinnamon Bonnie Bell on. Like, she's living her life. But like stopping a prison riot. Right. And like Katara completely overcomes systemic sexism and like generations of like, I can't imagine, like, the Water Nation, women can only be healers. And it's this interesting thing because at this point in medical science, women could only be nurses. They could only be caregivers or doulas. They couldn't be doctors. So it's, there is some really interesting parallels that we then see, not in a moment of, I overcame this thing, because like we all know that Katara is like one of the strongest waterbenders we see in the whole series.
Oh, 100%.
Like that's the whole point of like why the creepy woman in book 3 has her learn bloodbending. Yeah. Because you can, with these kids, you can feel the raw energy off of them. And even, and so and we even see it again with the Kyoshi warriors in non-bending moments. They make non-benders of this equal to the benders in really important ways. And again, going back to Ty Lee and May, they have such a really cool arc at the end of the day. Like, they have a really interesting come around. And of course, Ty Lee becomes like Kyoshi Warrior, because why wouldn't she?
Yeah, of course.
Like, you know, and then I only imagine what happens when May comes with them, like joins Team Avatar for the next adventure, because, you know, she probably will, because she's not going to let Zuko leave her alone the next time.
Yeah.
She's going to be too bored. So, but it's these things of, this is expert storytelling. And even when, like, Secret Tunnel episode, the, like, one-off D&D episode.
Yeah.
Where it's like, what happens if Team Avatar's with a bunch of fucking bards?
Yeah.
You can also tell that the creators were theater people at some point, because they rag on theater people so, like, Secret Tunnel! Secret. It's so good. It's just so good. But they also are like, artists are going to help us tell this story. We're going to have to progress it along. I feel like even in moments where we feel like it's a wasted moment, it's never a wasted moment. Mm-hmm. And the things that these people are overcoming are things that even, like, it's been 15 years since the pilot aired. And so, which is weird to think about.
Yeah, wow.
But we're still dismantling things that they were addressing in the show 15 years ago, which were things we were addressing 20 years before that. You know, Katara...
It's not one of those shows that's like, you know, for its time, it made a lot of, you know, it did a lot of good things. For its time, yeah. And now it's still just as prescient.
And there is not a single moment that is cringy or makes me go, ugh, that didn't age well. None of it. There is none of the show that feels like it aged poorly. Yeah. Actually, I feel like you couldn't make Avatar now because people would lean too hard into what they were saying, and it would be too heavy-handed. I think the way they were doing it then, because we all had hope for a different future, I don't think we were hoping for the one that we're in. This timeline is fucked. I don't want to live in this one anymore. But, you know, there are these moments of, again, we meet these characters who continually come back, because even Jet, who has a really weird storyline for them. Oh, yeah. You know, it ties into the Iroh storyline. It ties into the Zuko storyline. There's just so much. And the lovely thing is, at times, the stakes are very small, even though we know there's eventually one very large stake that's happening. And the fact that they let us take time to get somewhere. You know, you know, in book one, it's a big idea. They have no idea what they're trying to accomplish, the characters. And then they're like, okay, we got to go to the North Pole. That's what we have to do. And then, you know, in book two, he's starting towards, you know, it's the comet and the blackest day. And they know they've got that Aang is eventually going to have to take on Fire Lord Ozai, which is a huge thing. And then finally, when you get to that Dragon Ball Z level fight at the end of the show.
Oh, it's so epic.
So epic. Holy shit. When the Fire Lord sparks those, like, 100...
Yeah. Like, so at first I was like, okay, firebending, like, on the one hand, it feels like it has an advantage because you don't need to have an element around you as long as you just have, like, your inner breath. And like, first I was like, okay, so what? You can... It's almost like they're designed to be oppressive and warmongering because, you know, fire, it's hard to create. So seeing the episode about the firebending masters was so different to see this society where you could use fire in a way that was really non-destructive, or at least not destructive in the way that the Fire Nation did it. So yeah, I was like, oh man, firebending seems mostly just kind of destructive. And then I was like, Ozai can fly? You can use fire to jet propel yourself? I was like, okay, wow, that's cool, you know.
Oh yeah. Well, especially when we started seeing like what Azula could do, and we're like, okay, crazy girl, okay, crazy, all right. Well, but what I really like is that at no point they don't do what DC let everybody do to Harley Quinn for a very long time, which is like, just call her that crazy bitch. Whereas Zula, you're like, I wouldn't ever utter that because her hands will be on my throat. I will be dead. There will be a lightning blast to my heart as soon as I... You know, and it makes so much sense the more we learn about her that, like, she naturally, like, bends electricity. Like, that is just, like, she doesn't bend regular fire.
Yeah,
it's always blue
fire.
fire. But it makes sense because she is so hot burning and she's so focused and driven. And then you actually kind of feel terrible for her on her, because we don't really see it happening, and then we see it overnight where she starts to unravel. And I know everybody at home, as you watch this through quarantine, there's a scene near the end where Azula cuts her own bangs, and I went, girl, I'm right there with you. This is quarantine. Like, all of us in quarantine are Azula in book 3, like, right before that finale. Because then she gets that, like, weird swagger of the, like, unhinged Azula.
Yeah.
And you're like, but something also that we talk about, you talked about the 4 techniques. In all of the time of Zuko following Aang, it's not just Aang learning the 4 techniques, it's the other benders learning each other's techniques to improve their bending. Zuko only wins because there are moments where he is firebending in an earth technique, and then he's firebending in a air technique, and firebending in a water technique. In a way, it's the only way that he is able to actually counteract Azula, because she has that mathematic brain and she can pick apart what he's going to do before he does it. Until she can't, because she doesn't have the grasp of having the art form. Like, she also, the few Fire Nation people that I love are the ones that look at bending as an art form, not as an oppressive tactic. And, like, that's the whole point of the Fire Lord, is that it's a tactic. And with the grandfather, it was a tactic. It is a tool, where instead of that, it's, you know, Zuko and Iroh, even, I think they look at it as a gift. You know, it is a gift that they are given. And so, you know,
I see it a lot in Iroh, where, like, the use of fire and the way that he incorporates it isn't just the way that we see it, like, in all of the intros, where you see the Fire Nation attacking and they're all basically, they're using it like a weapon. But you see Iroh I'm thinking about when he uses it to, like, warm his tea because it's cold, or when he then uses it to breathe fire with his tea or with the water, you know, and just has these, like, he's much more creative with fire in a way that makes me think of Iroh more like the community of firebenders, where Aang and Zuko meet the firebending masters, and this idea of fire being more than this thing that's generated to accentuate your punches and your kicks.
Yes.
You know, it takes on a life of its own in a different way.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and it's so interesting. And even with the world that we're living in, because I started, you know, with everything that's happening, we started actually seeing, you know, more memes are coming out that are Avatar memes, because people are revisiting Avatar. And the there is no virus in Ba Sing Se, Judy memes. But what's interesting, so I was just looking, and the episode that they were nominated for an Emmy Award was City of Walls and Secrets, which is when they're given the house in Ba Sing Se, and Judy gives them the tour, and they run into Jet again. And which is really interesting that it is that is the Emmy episode, and it does make sense now that we look at it. And what's interesting is where they are in Ba Sing Se at the point, I believe, is where we are in America right now. Like, it's hard to watch because everyone's going, you don't need to wear a mask, it's fine, all the kids can go back to school, it's all good. And we're like, is it? Is it? We can't travel across borders right now. I'm not sure this is very good at all.
Yeah.
You know, it's one of those. And so it's interesting now looking back and kind of seeing what, you know, what they, you know, these stories that they were telling that were also these moments of, oh, I lost it. My brain,
All good.
Yeah. Yeah. So was there, Alan, so as we keep going, is there anything that you, upon watch now, as a crafter, a storyteller yourself, is there anything that you would have liked to see done differently about the show?
You know, that's a very good question. I was thinking to myself, like, what did I want more of that I wasn't getting? But I found that every time I was asking myself that question, the show gave it to me. It just gave it to me a little bit later on. You know, it gave me more about Zuko, it gave me more about Iroh, it gave me more about all of the characters. So I think the thing that I would have wanted was to really feel the nuance of each of the characters, and I got that. You know, I wanted to know more about the world, and then I got that. And so I don't know. I guess what's built into the show is that you don't really get to see the Air Temple and the Air Nomads in their prime, and you don't get to see many pacifistic firebenders. But then you do. You know, you get to see firebending not in this villainous way necessarily. And you get to see more of it, like in Legend of Korra, which I think is cool, where you get to see a firebender who's not a hothead, really. Like he's much more evenly tempered with the other characters, and so I think that's one thing that I found myself seeing not as much of, but I think that's also because the Fire Nation itself was this oppressive imperialist force. So I think where I got some of that human side in the Fire Nation as an industry, right, or as a nation, is when we see some of the Fire Nation citizens be oppressed by others or be discriminated against by others by virtue of the fact that they are Fire Nation, you know, and you get to see the different layers and levels of the society where, you know, it's the citizens can't control that they're going to a war, that, you know, that their nation is going to war, and then you also get to see the kind of the indoctrinating processes when Aang goes to Fire Nation school, you know, and so you do get to see. I did get to see a lot of the things that I wanted to see. I guess the Air Temple and the Air Nomads as like a group, but I get some of that in Legend of Korra. So it's like, okay, you know, it's a little bit of redemption in that. But yeah, I think that was one of the things that was missing the most. But it made sense. Nice. You know? It was always necessary. Yeah,
I think it makes sense, and I think we would always go back to one when we needed to get to a kind of a regathering moment. But, you know, at the same time, it was one of those where we didn't want to spend too much time at the Air Nation, because every time we did, it was a trigger for Aang.
Yeah.
And you know, when Zuko finally is like, oh god, that great, when he's like, hey gang, it's me, Zuko.
It's one of my favorite moments of the whole show.
When Zuko's trying to figure out how to be like a normal human being and like introduce himself to the people he's been trying to murder for a year and a half.
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny.
He accidentally like burns Toph's feet. I'm like, if this is D&D, you know Zuko just rolled a nat 1 in diplomacy.
Oh, well, and Zuko rolls a nat 1 a lot, which I think is something really interesting about the character. No, I will say, I said this about She-Ra, Princesses of Power on Netflix as well. Mm-hmm. Avatar, in many ways, watches like a D&D campaign plays. Because there are moments where the characters just literally nat out, and they're just like, well, here we are, we fucked that up. And then that one time where Aang having his back hit in just the right spot on that rock to unblock his chi is the greatest moment. And it's it's the nat 20 with the modifier that is exactly one higher than what that monster has life left, like hit points left. And so it's, Oh, and Azula always rolled really well. Yeah. But like, you know, it's and that moment where Aang's chi unblocks just at that moment he needs it to in that fight with Fire Lord Ozai.
That was like, one part where I was like, well, that was the one moment where it felt like the course of events was not character driven, you know?
Right.
Like that's the one moment where it's like, oh, it just by luck, just by chance.
Yeah. Well, and it's because I think Aang, they steadily had a whole stream of like, they are not lucky at all. It's like what happens when your party is just not fucking lucky. Mm-hmm. And then but then you'll get the ones where like they end up really lucky. And then it's like Ba Sing Se and they're like, oh, we're not lucky at all. This is not lucky. You know, or when they make it to the northern Water Tribe. And they're like, oh, thank God. And then Sokka's girlfriend becomes the moon, and we watch the earth, the ocean of moon spirits murder, and Aang becomes a giant kaiju. Like, there are all these things where you're like, things went really bad. Or when Appa's missing. I loved book 2 when Aang gets messy and Aang gets really angry. And because what's funny is, like, he spends book 2 so the opposite of what the air priests taught him. And then in book 3, he spends the entire time begging people to tell him how to not kill Ozai.
Yeah.
Oh, also I'd say the lion turtle, also total stroke of luck.
Yeah, that was another one where I kept thinking about that part of book 3. And I was like, oh, but I loved when they talked about, like, so much of the spirit world and this connection. I'm like, they didn't really. Oh, it was all in Legend of Korra. And that's another thing that I thought was cool in Legend of Korra, where they talk about the spirit world and bending.
Well, and we spend so much of Korra the later seasons. Like, and I love Korra once you could tell it switched online. And so they were like, fuck the censors. We can do whatever we want. And that show got a lot more solid also because Nickelodeon let them go and they just let them make the show, which is what they should have done to begin with. Because it worked with this. But yeah, that's another moment. But we also needed a moment where Aang needed like a mom and a dad. Aang needed someone who he could hug. And for him, that was Avatar Roshi for most of the show. He was like the grandfather to him once he didn't have the air nomads teaching him. He needed that, like, because, like, I love when they're like, Avatar Kyoshi killed this man, so now you have to die. And Avatar Kyoshi's like, yeah, I killed him. I'd fucking kill him again. And you're like, okay, great. Which is why when we get off here, I'm going to order the Kyoshi books because I want to read them. Because you want a messy Avatar. I feel like Kyoshi's a messy Avatar.
I see that.
But I think the only thing I can say, and it's because I say this about everything, and they did fix it with Korra, even though now some people are like, it really wasn't. I just wish Avatar had been gayer. That's my only thing.
Yeah.
I wish it had been gayer, but it didn't need to be because they made so many things naturally come out of people, and I feel like if there were some characters that they tried to pack that into, or, there were probably queer characters I just didn't see because it wasn't important to the character development. They didn't need to be pigeonholed as that and to a stereotype of what that would mean for. Also, it's 2005 and it's a children's network. So I also feasibly learned. Well, and then we get to Korra and it gets real gay.
Oh, yeah.
Real gay. I mean, even if it's just Asami and Korra, it gets real gay. But also, and that's just time progressing. And hopefully, if there's a future, or maybe, so Alan, we talked about the movie and it's not great. And it's because they had, so I feel the best movie adaptations from source material, the only people that make it appropriately are the people that created the property to begin with, or people who are such diehard fans that they're committed to it. Mm-hmm. And I get when M. Night Shyamalan was like, my kid loves the show. He's like, I think I've watched 5 half episodes. I get it. And he was doing it as a love letter to his kids. I hope his kids were very angry with him. But it's also, this is one of those things, it's like, why? We're at a point where episodic writing is just so much more effective than, like, the blockbuster writing. Mm-hmm. Because, like, even over on Let's Rewatch, another podcast on certain POV, they just did a kind of a roundup of all the Marvel movies. And they were like, the Marvel movies got really solid when they started writing each movie as if it's an episode of a TV show leading into something else. And so, also, they did a lot in 13 or that first season is a lot of episodes of Avatar. It's quite a few episodes because the seasons get shorter and shorter, which was really interesting. which as we now see happens a lot with the the TV that we're telling now, that but so they did all these things. Hold on, I'm pulling it up right now. There are 66 episodes between 3 seasons, but season 1 was a whole lot of episodes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, it was 21.
21, which is what we typically expect from.
Oh wait, I'm a dirty liar. That was book 3. Book 3 was 21. Book 1 was 20.
Yeah. And book 2 is short. I believe, if I remember correctly, book 2 is short. It is short book.
Could be.
Oh no, it's also a long one.
I think it's
dirty
22.
liar. Yeah, dirty liar. Well, I mean, 3 seasons, 66 episodes.
It didn't feel
It's got to
long.
get bigger. It didn't feel long. Well, and that's why with book 3, I went, wait, was this a short series? Because I felt like episode 8, when the comet or when the eclipse happened, you're like, oh, this is the end. And then I went, oh no, they have to fuck this up.
Yeah.
In order for there to be more. And I like that Katara was mad at her dad because he just never came looking for them. Mm-hmm. The war was so much more important. Sorry, folks, I'm in Florida, so we're getting our typical midday storm that's going to last 5 minutes or 2 hours. I don't know. But yeah, there are all these moments. But, how do you cram 20 episodes into a 2-hour movie, even a 2.5-hour movie? How do you cram? Why would you want to cram all of this beautiful story? So, there's this moment of, when they're setting up so much for book 2, we get the blue spirit halfway through book 1 to set him up for book 2 for Zuko and all these things so we're getting a live action series of Avatar on Netflix.
I can't wait. I really can't wait.
I'm also going to say I also can't wait because it is the original creators. Mm-hmm. It's the team. It's going to be awesome. That's the thing is, now there are some things where I don't know if I'd want to see this in live action, but Netflix throws so much money at their series that I think, it's already been in production. Production is halted right now because of COVID. So it's going to be a little while before we get the series, but it is one of those where I go, I don't mind.
No.
I don't mind. And they're committed to a culturally appropriate and non-white cast, which I think is non-whitewash cast. Mm-hmm. Which was the biggest issue with the movie.
I think it's so interesting because M. Night Shyamalan was vocal about his intent for it to be a very culturally diverse cast. What I thought was interesting is that the majority of the Fire Nation were cast as, I believe it was
South
Indian
Asian.
and Iranian, right? And
Yeah.
And which I think is interesting because the source material is, I think they said that they wanted it to be imperialist China.
Yeah.
And so I think it makes me wonder why I appreciate the opportunity for representation for actors of color, but it does change the story a little bit, I would say. It's interesting to see and I think also with the namings of the characters, to see Commander Zhao, and also just the way that the characters are, right? Then the way that they changed a lot of the fundamental personalities, I feel. Iroh, totally different.
Totally different.
Sokka, not funny.
Also, it's because all Jackson Rathbone had done was fucking Twilight, and so he's got the man bun, and he can't sit there and just look pensive and sad the whole fucking time because he wants to eat somebody. That's. But the nice thing about this is because the title alone sells this property, I hope it's all mostly unknown people. Now, I will say, Dev Patel is an amazing actor.
Yeah,
I was actually really excited to see him play Zuko, and I think they cheated him because he was the only one that I go, actually, you're really great in this role. We could leave you. It'd be fine. Yeah. But, it's also one of those of why in a world where you don't have to make brown people the villain, why are we making brown people the villain?
Yeah. Also, his
It's-
scar was not that big. It wasn't that bad. Zuko looked fine. Like, why? It's a little point, but I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah, it's supposed to be like the whole face.
yeah. And when we first see Zuko in Avatar: The Last Airbender, he looks a little scary. You know, his
Yeah.
his hair is done up. He's got a very fierce demeanor in himself and in his armor. And then in the film, he's just a little grumpy. You know, he's a little grumpy guy.
Yeah. 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 I love it. And I'm unabashedly excited for the series.
Me too.
The fans at home can come for me all they want. I am worried they're going to make it like 12 episodes, so they're going to trim some fat. Unless they make them hour-long episodes, then make it an hour-long episode. Give it to me. I will sit through all of it. And so we've talked about Korra a little bit. I think everyone should give Korra another chance. If they didn't like it the first time, I think it's really important. And it was them being messier. It was them making some mistakes because they didn't make a lot of them the first time around. And so, they were telling a very different story. Like, writing for Aang is very different than writing for Korra. And, and Bolin and Mako are very different than Katara and
Sokka.
Sokka, thank you, and Toph. There are these, moments of, and then Asami is so much different than Sokka because she's the non-bender. So, the dynamics were different, but I think I liked that they wanted to approach another story of another Avatar and do it in the future. I kind of like doing these. Every 8 or 10 years, give us another Avatar series. Mm-hmm. Go into the future. I don't care. But it's a thing that there's so much bad happening in the world right now, and this is just so vehemently good, and it gives so much hope, and it encourages everybody to be better people. That I think everybody just needs to go back and rewatch Avatar. They need to watch it for the first time. If you're not an animated fan, watch it anyway. It's so good.
It's so good.
Don't watch Friends again. Don't watch The Office again.
Nah.
Don't. So, two other things I want to chat with you about. So, yeah. I know it was in the interweb communities. The creators had posited this idea of the next Avatar actually being identical twin Earthbenders. What do you think about that idea?
This is news to me. I'm not too much on the interwebs, so that's
so well. And this was like 4 or 5 years ago because they were already they were talking about doing. Yeah, they were talking. Well, this was back when Avatar was on Netflix the first time, and Netflix was starting to do original programming, and so they were talking about taking it to Netflix and having Netflix be the center of Avatar of the next series. And so I guess it'd be that idea of like, well, an avatar is a soul, is a being, but what happens when, you've got one clump of DNA in cells? What happens when that cell happens to split into two cells that are identical? So they both technically are the avatar or could be the avatar. I don't know. What do you... So, because also then my idea would... they didn't talk timeline, but I go, okay, Korra goes into the spirit realm at the end of Korra with Asami. So, like, does that mean Korra ages? Does she just die one day? Does the avatar cycle start again because she's in the spirit realm permanently? What does that mean? Or assuming Korra can get old, if we're in like 1930s Japan... Korra lives to be 70, that puts us in like 1980s, 1990s.
Yeah.
And so like what does think of like a vaporwave lo-fi Avatar world?
Yeah, what does that look like? And also like in terms of the storytelling, like are they both the same element?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess probably because of the Avatar cycle.
Yeah.
But that would make sense. But then
and can each of them only learn one of the other two, and so you have to have them together? Like, what does that mean? Is their avatar state them combined, so you can only actually achieve the avatar state when they're both together?
Yeah, what happens if one dies,
Exactly. Like, does that start the next thing in the cycle over again? Like, what is that? Yeah. What does that do?
I'd love to see a differently abled avatar.
Yeah.
Because I think even like a differently abled Bender, because most,
Yeah.
and just to see what that world looks like and to see how the creators build on that, and to see what it's like to have these sorts of powers, what those powers look like. And I mean, I guess to be fair, Toph is differently able.
Yeah. But like, what happens if like Tio, who is the Earth Nation kid that's in the wheelchair? What happens if he were an Earthbender,
Right.
but he physically is not connected with the Earth? Like, what does that mean for
Right.
his bending? Or what if what does a bender even? What if it was a water bender without? Oh, don't we get that in Korra?
In Korra, we get a waterbender who doesn't have arms, but the arms are just of water. So I guess I guess I take that back then.
But so I think I agree with you. I think, or what happens? There's no like trans characters in Avatar, and so I'm not saying they need to be there just so we can check a box, but like, what does that mean when you are a spirit entity that is... Because technically the Avatar is non-binary. The moment you become the Avatar, you are completely non-binary. But you as a being, because that's the whole thing I love about Aang is like, I am Aang and I'm the Avatar. I am two beings that are one, but I'm still Aang. And so, you also have that aspect of each of these avatars are... they are everyone that came before them, but like they have to work hard to access that. Or like, I would love to know more about that female airbender that was the last airbender before airbender
Aang.
avatar before Aang.
Yeah.
And because she's very interesting. Her look was just interesting. And so, this idea of two spirits, what does that mean? Or do we get to a point where there's also another continent of people that they didn't know before that? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Because that was the only thing in Korra. I was like, well, what happens if these nations aren't the only continents on the planet, but they just haven't gotten there yet?
Oh, that's interesting.
Does bending exist there? Like, what would an Americas look like?
Yeah.
With the woman who we don't speak her name because she's a TERF and we don't like her, but she started talking about this in Fantastic Beasts and like, what did American witchcraft look like, because it was the colonists coming over, but the First Nations people had their own magic. It was wandless magic. They didn't need that Eurocentric magic in the way that like white Europeans had harnessed magic. So like, could bending look a little different? I don't know if that's expanding too much, but again, this is a universe that I would love to continue to see them revisit. The only thing I would love is an animated movie that picks up the comic, because there's a run of comic books that picks up right after book 3, and it's them looking for Zuko's mom.
Right.
And it's like I believe 3 volumes. I have not read it. Again, I'm going to order them as soon as we're off the call tonight. Because I know Azula is a character in that, and they do utilize Azula, and I don't think she's good, obviously. But, and like, they didn't really address Aang. I mean, until we get to Amon, this idea of like Aang learning the chi blocking from the
lion turtle.
Lion turtles, though I do love that when we get Avatar Wan, that the lion turtles are the ones that gave them the Avatar power. Like that
so,
was
like,
cool
that
to
all
me. I
makes
was
sense.
like, yeah, it's so it made sense that Aang learned how to chi block from them. But it's such a rich and vibrant world, and I want to live in any world where we have infinite storytelling possibilities, and that is this world. It's this universe, and that's where I want to live.
100%.
Yeah. So I want to go back now, because most shows are guilty of doing clip shows or recap shows. And now this show always had really in-depth flashbacks at the beginning of every episode to some, and it wasn't always telling you what happened episode before. They could go back books. They could go back 25 episodes, because like when Jet showed up, we got a little recap of like what happened with Jet the first time that we got Jet. So book 3, we get the Ember City Players episode.
Yes.
of Avatar the Musical, which I will put it on our social media. There is someone on TikTok right now doing clips of he's writing an Avatar the Musical, and it's so good. He'll put a little hoodie in front of his eye when he's doing Zuko. He's just this cute little, I assume he's queer. He's just so adorable. The music's fire. It's a bop. I was like, I'll produce the show. Call Nickelodeon. SpongeBob was great. Get Tina Landau in. Yeah. Let's do Avatar. But they get away with doing a 21-minute recap episode of 2.5 seasons of a TV show that we have just watched. That's like poorly performed by like community theater essentially, but like so in every TV show you get to a point, for my Buffy fans, this is Tabula Rasa and the musical, where so much has gone unsaid that they have to say everything that's gone unsaid because it ruins everything, and it's the exposition that needs to move on. Mm-hmm. And so for Team Avatar, it was this episode when they had to watch themselves watch through everything. And it was great because, like, Toph wasn't around for book 1, so Toph had no idea what happened. Suki's been gone the whole goddamn time. And so, like, she didn't know that, like, Zuko fell in love with the goddamn moon. Like, you know, those... It's such a cleverly crafted episode because... One, it makes fun of the show and all the absurdities of it, like Aang being this very and the whole thing about it is the all 3 nations, there are such gender stereotypes for men and women. Like, men have to be masculine and have honor and all these things, and women are delicate and fun. And so Aang being so offended that a woman is playing him. Yeah. And again, it's like I said before, it was also just such a smart mirror of like Beijing opera, Peking opera, and early kabuki. Like, it's so interesting as a theater person to see. But what were your thoughts as like a musical theater person or a theater person?
I loved
with that episode.
I loved all of it. It's similar to like the Secret Tunnel episode where you have these just artists living in this world. You have like Sokka's objections to the liberties that are taken with his character, and him like going backstage and giving his input on some jokes that he can throw in, and yeah, I think like it was cool to like watch what you said was a great representation of Beijing and Peking opera, and to feel like I'm getting an experience that's different from watching animated TV. It's always cool to see a different medium of art in a different medium of art. Yeah. Like, I don't know if you watch Supernatural, but there's one episode where Sam and Dean are trapped in this world of television, and so you see them come in and they're in sitcom mode. You see them, they're in PSA mode, and all these different genres, and this to have everyone be in on the joke of we're playing with this medium. I think that episode does a great job of it. And then also is cool to like see that they are kind of hammering in the different archetypes and having the characters go, I'm not that archetype. You know, I'm not that, having Katara go, I'm not that motherly, am I? And have Toph be completely happy with her representation. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's great because, again, if in less capable hands, that is what Avatar would have been like. Like, Katara would have been the crying weepy girl, and you know, it's all these, it's oh god, it's such a thing. It's so deliciously community theater in so many ways. Yeah. No offense to anyone in community theater. I got my start in community theater. I love community theater. Same. But it's also it's showing the absurdity of another art form that they obviously have so much reverence for in musical theater. But again, it's what happens when we acknowledge that the rest of the world is aware of what's happening within this world. Like, also the question is like, who's been telling the story?
Yeah, right.
Who's been talking? Who was always there? Because like even the cabbage guy is there. It's, you know, it's one of those moments, but it's also an interesting use of propaganda and propaganda
at the ending
theater,
where
which
Ozai
again,
wins.
yeah, Well, and again, that's also something that happened with Beijing and Peking opera in the middle of the 20th century. There were a canon of like 13 shows that were allowed to be produced. They all were rewritten in ways that glorified Chairman Mao and all these things, including Mulan, which is really interesting. That the idea that Mulan was reworked as the People's Republic propaganda. Like, it's so interesting to, and it's seeing out in this, because then it's also one of those that they then go, wait, we haven't done this yet. This has not happened. And it gives Aang that kick of, oh God, I'm assuming everything's going to be okay because I'm the Avatar. Maybe it's not going to be okay. Like, what's going to happen? And so that was really interesting. And again, it's so funny and so good. And it's an episode that you could show anybody without having them have watched the rest of the series at all. I think there's way more payoff if you've watched the rest of the series.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's way funnier.
Yeah.
But also, like, no other show would be ballsy enough to do a recap episode where you're watching other people play the roles and you're watching the cast watch it. Like, it's just so...
It's so smart. Just the writers are so smart.
It's so... Yeah, they're so intelligent. I would love to see more from them that's not even just in this world. Like, they world build in such a beautiful way. When they were talking about doing Magic the Gathering and things for Netflix, I was like, call the Avatar team over. They would handle the Magic lore beautifully. Yeah. They can handle... I would love to see a story set in Ravnica written by these guys. I'd love it. Like, it's just so... I think right now I'm searching for anything it can to give me peace and serenity and joy. And that's... Even at its lowest moments, this brings me so much peace and so much joy. That it's just so good.
I can't watch the show without feeling good. Like, every character, even when they're bad, like, it's just, meaning like villainous, it's just so artfully done.
Yeah, art. It is a true piece of art. And I had something profound to say and it's gone. No. So we saw this happen with The Good Place this year. And several other shows have done this. I want shows to stand up to the networks and end when they want to end. Stop a show when it hasn't been overplayed, so we don't get the last season of Game of Thrones. Just those moments of know when your story is done, but it doesn't mean you can't come back to it. But know when that story is done,
right? Or
have an end goal in sight and know where you have to get there. But like, everybody was so sad this year. They were like, Supernatural's ending, and I was like, babies, y'all.
It ended a long time ago.
I mean, all those men are delightful beefcakes. They are so wonderful, as queerbaity as that show is. But that show should have ended 10 years ago.
Yeah, when I first saw it, my aunt and uncle, I think, had me watch up until like season 5 or 6. But at which point, was it the creators or directors? Some aspect of the creatives changed, and they were like, they were like, as far as we're concerned, this is where the show should have ended. And then it reverted to kind of Monster of the Week style.
Yeah. And there are ways to make Monster of the Week work. Like, Buffy is one of those rare shows where, despite what we now know about Joss Whedon, he, with the exception of season 4, which is a little rocky, they always made, like, each time Buffy dies, they actually kept the show going without her for a little bit to bring her back. But that was where Monster of the Week worked, because that was the show. But like Charmed, they literally did a final episode and then they went, oh wait, we're coming back for one more season, and that last season was a cacophonous disaster. So it's it's one of those things. It's like, I would love to see, especially when we're in an age where Americans are taking the kind of European model of how to tell stories in 6 or 8 episodes instead of 22. To do like Avatar and just end when you're ending.
Yeah.
Like, have an end in sight. Because then you'll know what story you're telling. Because I think so many American shows get lost because they forget the story they're telling and they don't have an end in sight.
Yeah.
They have a temporary end. And it's perfect. I love it. It's so good.
It's so good.
So Alan, if you had to pick, a favorite episode, a favorite scene, they don't have to be from the same, and a favorite character, what would they be?
Yikes. Okay.
I know it's a big question. It's a big
question, but it's also an easy question because, like, Tales of Ba Sing Se has my heart.
Yes,
in many ways. The beach episode has my heart in a different way because of the way it like unpacks the nuance of the villainous characters and also leads to some sweet redemption stories by the end of book 3. Favorite? What was next? Favorite character or favorite moment?
Yeah, favorite character.
Okay.
Favorite moment. Yeah, favorite moment in the series. Okay. If you've got one that just it can be either it's your favorite and it wasn't good, or favorite and it hit the feels, or just favorite because you think it is the best.
That's tough. I'll throw out some contenders.
Great.
Appa is just he might be my favorite character actually. These two questions are tied together for me because I think my favorite characters, in terms of what they do for me and watching them, are Appa and Iroh, for so many reasons. Like what I think is cool about Iroh is that the Iroh that we see is so different from what the story tells us that Iroh was for such a long time, and so that might be something in a flashback or some element that like would be really cool to see to almost like have a Rogue One equivalent of Avatar, like something in the 100 Years War where we see Iroh as the villain. Ozai's basically Palpatine, this kind of more amorphous villain that we don't even really get to see. But then Appa is. I'm amazed at how much character there is in this non-verbal, lovable creature. Even just the way that he's drawn. He's so cute. It's you have the.
You can't see. I'm holding up my Appa Funko Pop. They've made him in several sizes. I have the small size, but
so cute.
He good boy. He's goodest boy.
So cute, and just like the voice acting too for Appa is just is so successful.
So good.
He's just such a great actor. I forget his name. I'm so sorry. And then favorite moment.
Moment or two. You can have maybe, or even top 3 moments if that's easier for you to break down.
I'm a sucker for redemption moments. So like one of the moments that shocked me was during the prison break, and and seeing Ty and May, just like that, and not just the actions that they perform, but also like the animation of it, the eye contact, the playing with time, is really 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 powerful. And Zuko's moments, like I think his cool moment, I would say, or one of the first ones, is when he tries so hard to befriend the group and seeing that whole sequence. I think that's a great moment.
Yeah. I think those are lovely, Alan. I think that's wonderful. Mine are very similar. I think I have to put Tales of Ba Sing Se with that Appa episode separate because they're such beautiful. They're an experiment in storytelling. They're beautiful storytelling. They're so delightful. But honestly, I think my favorite episode, for reasons, and I don't know why this episode hits so hard for me, but it's when Zuko leaves on the ostrich horse and he helps the farm family until they find out that he's Fire Prince Zuko. And so that character, I don't know why Zuko resonates with me a lot, but it's because he is intrinsically so good, because that is it's such a beautiful study of nature versus nurture. And like the nurture versus not so nurture of Azula and Zuko. And so I think those moments from that episode, for me, it just hits it hits so hard, but also the beach. I think for me, the beach episode stands out because of Zuko, and we see what actually happened and why he got thrown out. But then, like, his mother leaving in those moments of his grandfather dying and his father becoming Fire Lord. Also, his brother became, or his dad became Fire Lord very young. There's a huge age gap between him and Iroh.
Yeah.
And because he's not gray haired. That's like this whole thing is like he's this. Also, why are the Fire Nation so ripped? Fire Lord Ozai rips off his shirt.
Oh my
and I was
gosh,
like,
yeah.
I was like, I don't like muscles, but like evil daddy vibes. Let's go.
Yeah, like,
Ooh,
man,
okay, it's fine.
sitting on a throne has done you well, you know?
Oh,
Like,
yes. He's not Fire Lord. I'll call him Fire Daddy.
Right.
Not really, everyone. That's ridiculous. The gays need to watch things and not thirst trap. But especially this, it's so... Well, it's also weird because you got so many people that are in their 20s and 30s now that were like, oh, God, I wanted to date Zuko when I was a kid. And I was like, it's hard now because, like, I'm watching it and I was like, I'm not into any of these kids because they are literal children.
Because they are children. Right.
They are children. So, but it's so funny when people go, oh, that was my crush. And I go, that says a lot about you of who your Avatar crush was. Though my friend was like, I didn't know I was gay, but I crushed on Azula real hard. What does that say about the women I love? And I was like, I now understand why you don't date. I get it. Characters, yeah, I think it has to be, it's a cut between Iroh because you have to, and I think that's adult me. I think if I'd watched this through when it came out, I don't think I would have appreciated Iroh in the same way. My dad is very much like Iroh. He's very goofy and sweet and loving, and I am a lot of the human I am because of my dad, and so I don't think I would have appreciated Iroh as much as I do now when the show first came out. So Iroh and Boomy, I love Boomy. And he's so good because he's also a grounding force for Aang. Like Aang's team Avatar goes so much farther beyond Katara and
Sokka.
Sokka. Oh my God, I'm so mad at myself. And Toph. And Appa. I think also because they did this really interesting thing of they looked at a bison's eye and then what a color flip would be, like what an albino color flip would be. So Appa's got like 5 dimensions to his eyes in a way that like none of the human characters have. And I love Appa's, and I loved Appa, but again, it's not until Appa's episode of Appa trying to like save the day on Appa's own and escape. Also because, so it blends into my moment. One of my moments is Aang hitting Avatar state in the desert because they took Appa. And Katara crying and Katara pulling him into her in full Avatar state.
Yeah.
That's another moment where like Katara is just so much stronger than anyone thinks she is because of that. But also it's a really well crafted episode because it's such a bait and switch. Is the episode, I believe it's early book 3, when we see Katara turning Toph into the Fire Nation. Because it's the gambling episode.
Yes.
And that they're the 2 moments of like that beginning moment and then the moment where Katara realizes that they're in a wooden prison with no water and they are boned because they knew they were coming for them. But honorable mention is going to go character-wise to Explosion Man. Oh God, what did they call him?
Oh man, it's not. It's Combustion Man.
Combustion Guy.
Combustion
yeah,
Guy.
He's such a cool silent villain. Like
he's one that
he
I
was
would want a little bit more lore on.
I wanted his backstory. One, because I don't understand his bending ability at all.
Yeah.
Unless the only thing I could think about, because it's centered around the mind chakra right here, and he's got the unless I wonder, is he not a bender and then had bending unlocked in him, and that's why it's all mind? His is the only because we see a lot of alternates to bending of like the sand bending, and I love the swamp people. They're so weird, but like I love that they can bend the water in the plants.
Yeah.
Like that is a really cool.
It's almost like blood bending, but for plants.
Yeah. All of the like bending adjacents that we get, I think is just really cool because I love a Power Rangers series. I love the X-Men, so give me a power up. Like all of these regional variances and how they bend, I think is really cool. But also then just Toph's like, I'm gonna do this thing until it works, and develops fucking metal bending. I think those are so that moment, and then yeah, and then I think my other moment I think has to be it's in that first episode when we watch Katara get so mad that she splits the iceberg in half. It's just so cool. And it says a lot about the strength of that character. And I'm a big Katara fan. I haven't talked about her a lot, but I'm actually a huge fan of her character and how human she is and how much stress she takes on herself. And rarely do I find myself rooting for a straight couple the way that I do, that I root for Aang and Katara. But also because I always get wigged out by romance and teenage stories because I'm like, why are we sexualizing teenagers so much? But in this, it's not like Sabrina now where it's just like teenage orgies. This is like actual teenage love.
Yeah.
And I love that Suki shows back up and that she's in the last battle with us. I think that's so important. The women of this series keep the series together. Because also, like, I can't imagine that I would have cared about book 2 and 3 if it had been an older brother.
Yeah.
To Zuko. If the fact that it's Azula makes it way more interesting. Also, because I can't imagine caring about a male counterpart to May and Ty Lee.
Yeah.
So
it's what I love about the show is the way it handles masculinity, and and it whether it's Sokka putting on a Kyoshi warrior outfit and being used to wearing or encountering wearing like a dress and makeup and armor and still being like fierce and powerful, or seeing. Iroh is very gentle in his way, which I think is a great foil to Zuko's brash, aggressive, kind of hyper masculine qualities. Also against when we see him as a child, where he's so gentle and he's such a tender-hearted human, and going back to your nature nurture or nurture versus less nurture, and thinking about what Zuko would be like if his mom had stayed around more. Or not stayed around. It wasn't her fault, probably. But like, just to see the tenderness in Zuko and to see the tenderness in a lot of these male characters, and we see a lot of it in Korra too, which I think is really lovely.
Listen, they call Iroh the dragon for the reason. I feel like he was aggressive and mean, and he's everything that he's not anymore. But also, and I believe this happened, I'm gonna look it up before, but even Iroh, who didn't necessarily need a character journey because he's a really fully fleshed out character from early on, his journey when he's in prison,
oh my gosh,
is so interesting and so lovely, and it's because it's he's just so good. But I believe I'm looking it up now, but I believe the actor that played Iroh passed away.
Yeah, we see the Tales of Ba Sing Se episode dedicated to Mako.
Yes,
tragic,
but
beautiful.
Well, and so it's so beautiful, and I think they did find a voice actor that sounded a lot like him. You can tell. There's a reason why Iroh is not in as much of the rest of the series, and it is because, the second voice actor is lovely, but he doesn't have the soul depth that Mako had, and so I also like to think that's why the characters named Mako and Korra.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sure. And so it's... But that was a hard one because I think I tangentially knew but didn't look it up. But it was one of those that I just went, oh, and but like having him just be like honing his body, because we see him as like this like plump delightful man, and you're like, no, that man is ripped.
Yeah.
He is gonna make a prison break, but he's still so sweet about it when he tells that one woman, he's like, you should go, you should not be here. You know, because it's, again, they work really hard to show us kind and gentle, wonderful people in the Fire Nation over and over again, and that they are rewarded for being good.
Yeah.
Which I love. And that they don't just needlessly kill all the Fire Nation soldiers.
Yeah.
I love that, like, we see all of them, they, like, swim up in the water and all these...
all the
and
time.
so,
Whenever, like, a plane explodes, anything cataclysmic or disastrous happens, you always see someone, like, get to safety first before we see the thing hit the ground and shatter.
Yeah, which well, also it's a kid's show, but I also think it's important because Aang is trying to do this with as little blood on his hands as possible, but it also does just show that there's such a difference when how, like, Sokka and Katara and Toph are willing to deal with things versus how Aang wants to deal with things, and I think this is a really good look at spirituality because it's a good conversation to have of, like, you can be spiritual and faith-based without being part of an oppressive religion.
Right.
And I think this is another reason where this made me want to revisit Buddhism again, not to be that white person that, like, appropriates Buddhism, but, like, Buddhism was a system of principles to, like, work with any religion to just it's how to not be a shitty person. And I think we need that more than anything right now.
100%. And I think we see that in Aang's, I mean, the whole nomads, even their costuming is based off of Nepali monks. And it's really, they're an inspiring nation out of all four, I would say.
And I think it's because it was really exhausting in book 3 to see that Aang constantly was like, I'm not going to kill him. I can't kill him. We're not doing it. And to have all the avatars that were like, sometimes you got to, kid. Even the other airbender, she was like, well, sometimes. She was like, that was teaching you how to be the monk. It's not teaching you how to be the avatar. I was like, I don't know if I would have liked the rest of you all. You all were not good people. Like, generally, like, oh God, I'm blanking on everybody's names. The Fire Nation, the Fire...
Avatar Roku?
Avatar Roku, thank you. He's the only one who, like, gives Aang, like, solid practical advice because they also showed that he was a good person. And, like, that his was the downfall of the good people of the Fire Nation, but there were still good people there. And so, you know, but it's... I like to think now that you've got silly Aang. Also, I just love going to Korra that Tenzin is so much like his mom. Like, he's so much like Katara. It's so good. It's just so... And just knowing how silly Aang is and Tenzin is not at all. And it's just so... But that we do get to see older Katara and Toph, and, you know, they tied the world together. And so I would encourage everyone who has not watched Avatar, go watch it. Anyone that's seen it but hasn't watched it recently, go back, rewatch it. And then everyone go watch Korra. Go watch Korra. Like, also, I don't really believe in owning media anymore, but, like, who knows how much longer this is on Netflix, so maybe go buy Avatar on Blu-ray. Oh, so that's my only complaint, other than that it's not gayer. I hated that they didn't do it in the Blu-ray ratio. We got it in the original television broadcast ratio.
Okay.
And so there were some times that when I watched it on my phone or my iPad, it was fine because it was smaller. But when I would, like, do my Chromecast to my television, which is like 32 inches, it didn't look great sometimes. It looked warped. There were just some things. And so that was the only thing I was like, Netflix, why didn't you get the nice version of this? Why didn't we get the shiny version? But again, that's nitpicking. And at this point, if we're nitpicking, it brings me joy and I'm happy that we have it now. So
Yeah. It's so good.
Is there anything that I didn't touch on, Alan, that you want to talk about that we want to say?
I mean,
because I could talk about Avatar for hours.
I think we covered a lot. Like, I was like,
we did.
Thinking about how a children's show covered story elements like fantastic arc, themes of imperialism, feminism, pacifism, spiritualism, like atheism or like secularism versus the sacred, genocide. Like it covers a lot in three seasons and 3 books, and is a children's show. And it's just friends of mine who had seen it and recommended it told me that it was like one of the best pieces of storytelling and art making out there. And having seen it, I agree. Like it is like from a critical, because it's something that you can sit back, relax, and enjoy, and something that you can spend so much time talking about and picking apart. And there are very few pieces of art that can do that, and I think this one does it really well.
I agree. And I definitely agree with you that we can call this art. Like, it's so much more than just... This is that thing that, like, Walt Disney started talking about and has continued on with a few rare creators, is that animation is an art form. It's not something lesser than. You can actually do... Like, I can't imagine them of ever doing this live action first. I think it would have failed and flopped, and they wouldn't have told an effective story. Because animation, you're not limited by animation. You're just limited by the talent of the animators, and they got great animators.
Oh, yeah.
And so... And it has that beautiful hand-drawn aspect, even though it was done digitally. Like, it's still so lovely. And I love anything that ages really well, that we don't have to go, it was great, except for this one thing. That I think I wish more things would do.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, thank you for coming on the show with me today.
Of course.
I appreciate this so much. Is there... Because you're in New York, you're in quarantine in New York and everything. Is there anything else that's just been bringing you joy that you've been doing to kind of break the monotony of your days or ground yourself?
Well, part of it has been a little bit Avatar inspired. Part of it has been watching some of the old school kung fu movies. But recently, I got very interested in like Shaolin Kung Fu, which is like the basis for. Basically all Chinese martial arts. There's a great film called Ip Man, which is right.
Yes, so good. It's so
fantastic film. I've seen it several times, and I shared it with my dad. And it's in that showcases the style of Wing Chun, right? Which was a style founded by a woman, and is just so. It's like reading about martial arts and getting very interested in it has invited me to think about. The union of health and wellness of mind, body, and spirit, not because I'm trying to get in shape for some role that I want to audition for, right? Yeah. It makes me think not about myself or my health for somebody else, but for myself. And I find that martial arts are an art form, and there are many instructors who see it that way. And so I've been doing like some qigong exercises in the morning. Was reading about some of the histories of Shaolin Kung Fu, its connections to, and how it's kind of the beginning of Chan Buddhism in China, and then the connection and interconnection between what we think of as like Chinese martial arts to Buddhism, which I normally think of as a more Indian and more roots with. And it's spread over to China and Japan and other East Asian countries. But to see this and study kind of lightly a whole other side of the world in a way of appreciation, and thinking about how, like you had said about with Buddhism in general, about how to be a better person. And so I find that accessing the question of how to be a better person through the body as a means of physical meditation has been super helpful in these times.
Well, and I think in Western thought, in Western society, there's such a focus on the body from an aesthetic standpoint, but we never focus on the mind and how the mind connects to the body and the soul and the heart, and kind of how they're all connected. And if one is not fully connected, or you're betraying yourself in one of them, you're going to fail in the other portions. And so I think it's really important that you're doing those things to kind of connect them. And I think that's beautiful, Alan. I think it's lovely. Well, especially being in the theater industry and entertainment, where there's such a focus on the beauty of the body, but not the character of the soul. Or the depth of the mind. And I think the most beautiful people, no matter what the body looks like, have a deep heart and a connected mind. So I think it's all very important. And you are
Avatar
a beautiful soul,
as a
Alan.
show points to this connection too, about like mind and body. and spirit.
It does.
And thank you for the compliment, by the way. I did hear that.
Of course.
It's quite lovely.
Of
You're
course,
a
you're
beautiful
good.
human. Maddie. I miss you.
I miss you. But that's also why I do these things, so I can just hang out with people for a couple hours. Though, just a couple, like literally 2 months ago, I was rescuing my sibling from New York. Oh, not rescuing, but we were moving my sibling out of New York. We were standing on a street corner, and literally out of nowhere, I was having the worst week. And out of nowhere, I hear Maddie, and I turn around, and it's Alan and his amazing girlfriend, Christine, who... incredible stage manager, incredible being. We were socially distant and smart, but they were walking past, and it was such a kismet moment of getting to like reconnect and get the energy that like I love and I needed. So like, I love it. I love it. It's so good. So Alan, where can everyone find you on the internet?
Sure. I am on Instagram. I'm not super active about it. I like supporting and clicking like on other things. But it is Alan, ALAN _R_Mendez. That's my Instagram handle. You can also find Mendez Aberman. That's MENDEZ ABERMAN. That's my musical theater writing partnership. We've got some things in the works. You can find some videos and little clips of what we like to do.
I love that. So before I let you go, if you could give 1 or 2 sentences of inspiration or just advice to our listeners at home for persevering through quarantine and the coronavirus, what would they be?
Know that you are not alone in your struggle. If you have a struggle, I know that I've been having some struggle, and I'm actually going to use some advice from my girlfriend, Christine, that I try to be very positive a lot of the time, and find ways to be productive with my time. And she is very good at looking at a situation like this and being like, this sucks right now. Which I think is also part of what she's so good at in being honest with the situation to know how to respond to it. I think she does a great job of that in life, and so it's something that I'm trying to do as well. She actually talked me out of doing a project that wasn't going to be following safety procedures, and I had, I think as artists it's very easy to say yes and very hard to say no so much of the time, and to have someone tell me that it's okay to say no because of health, and to look at a situation as it is and figure out how most appropriately to respond to it is great. And so love yourself, take care of yourself, feed your mind, your body, and your soul, and keep listening to Maddie. Maddie's so full of energy, and he keeps me going too.
Thank you for tuning in to another Isolation Cast, Voices from Quarantine. This show's not going to be regular release, but I'm so thankful for you all for joining us for another episode. We'll have a new episode for the next 2 weeks, maybe 3. We'll see what happens. As always, June was Pride Month, and because of COVID-19, Pride festivals and marches have been canceled across the country. So we here at Isolation Cast and our sister podcast, Soul Whip and Dreams, it's going to be Pride Summer. On our Teespring, we have some fun Pride items that you can see all the way through the end of August, and all proceeds go to the Ali Forney Center in New York, as well as the Center for Transgender Equality. We're introducing a collaboration with an Etsy store called Limerick Oddities, all one word, where we have bag clips and trading pins and stickers for Dole Whip and Dreams and Isolation Cast. And 100% of our Dole Whip Pride bag clip is going to go to the Okra Project, which is a coalition helping trans people of color. The links for these can all be found on our social media. And we can be found throughout all social media at Facebook at Dole Whip and Dreams Podcast, as well as Isolation Cast, on Twitter at Dole Whip Podcast, on Instagram at Dole Whip and Dreams, and even on TikTok at Maddie Lime. A big thank you has to go out to Carl, Firefly, Lex, Sasha, Jared, Case, Katie, Jesse, Rob, Heather, and all of our amazing patrons over on Patreon. We have some huge upcoming projects of some new regular shows that will be coming from the Dole Whip and Dreams family. We are growing at an exponential rate and will soon be offering a movie musical podcast, a cult and cringe-worthy movie podcast, a limited run series about the Tudor wives, as well as our deep dive into the true crime genre. You can check out our Patreon and subscribe for only $2 a month. That's right, just $2 a month, but you can always give more and we will always be so thankful. And over there you'll find exclusive content early, video content about the reopening of Disney World and what's happening in the pandemic, as well as discount codes and free merchandise exclusives just for our patrons. I just want to give a very special thank you to Brett Eagleston from the Let's Rewatch podcast for the use of the music in today's episode. Until next time, go out and find your joy.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.